Hello and welcome to Chile Talk, a series of shortish videos about life in contemporary Chile. My name is Neil Davidson. I'm a writer and newspaper columnist in Chile. This is Pete Leihy, a kind of academic and an enthusiast for Chilean history. And we're going to talk today about coronavirus in Chile and how it's been handled. So Pete, you have the eye for these kind of figures. What are the figures so far? How many people have supposedly had it in Chile?
Well, the official figure is 330,000 have had or have it.
Out of a population of
18 million. Well, actually, probably more like 20 million, but we don't always do the best job at counting them here
Oh,
in
I
Chile.
see. You don't think they've all been registered. Okay, interesting. So 300 and, how many was it, thousand?
330,000.
330,000. Of whom, how many have supposedly died from coronavirus?
Well, depends who you ask. At the moment, we're reporting the civil registry figures, and that number is on about 8,400 today, which is the 19th of July, I believe today is.
Right, okay. So if we compare that official figure with, say, bad figures like from Europe, Italy, Britain, Britain we've had so far supposedly 45,000 roughly, out of a population of about 63 million. So we're talking about a population a bit more than 3 times as large. So we're talking about officially about double the number of deaths per 1,000 inhabitants, whatever, right? Multiply the Chilean figure by 3, you get something like 25,000. You'd have to actually multiply by a bit more than 3. So, okay, so Chile is kind of not doing amazingly, but it's apparently doing quite a bit better than, say, Italy or Britain.
Yes, well, it's winter in Chile at the moment, so...
That's right.
So the figure appears to be stabilising, insofar as we can tell from the information that's released by the Health Ministry. It's been a very interesting story, the release of data in Chile. When the virus first hit in earnest, so we're talking from March 2020, we heard from the health minister, Jaime Manuelich at the time, that the figures in Chile appear to be the worst in Latin America, but actually they're the best.
Because there's more testing.
There's more testing, and the release of data seems to be less disingenuous in Chile.
Right, there was a rather undignified exchange of insults between Chile and Argentina, wasn't there, in which Argentina, the Argentinian, I think it was actually the president, was it? Alberto Fernandez himself?
Yes.
Boasted of Argentina's superior performance in controlling the virus, and the Chilean authorities replied with a list of points that Chile tested more and so on and was catching more cases. And I don't know quite who won, but I think both sides no doubt felt they'd won that exchange.
Well, as far as the international press is concerned, I think the international press take each particular country at its word as a matter of course. Certainly the World Health Organization does.
Yeah. I suppose an organisation like that relies on dues being paid by its members can't appear to disbelieve their figures. Well, I suppose perhaps it does have to appear to disbelieve their figures, I suppose, or else it would be totally unserious. But it all strikes me that on the Chilean news, the TV presenter, who I've referred to in a previous video as being people who feel it's incumbent upon them to kind of educate the benighted populace, will stand up and point to a figure and say, 348,327 people in Chile have now had coronavirus, such and such number have recovered. Of course, one knows these figures are totally absurd because, apart from anything else, half of all carriers are asymptomatic, supposedly. So these figures are completely, there's not the remotest possibility they could be correct, is there? But they treat them as though they were gospel.
It's an extraordinary part of Chilean tradition, I think. Certainly over the last 25 years, the aspiration to becoming a member of the OECD.
Which was realised, was achieved, in fact, a few years ago.
Yes.
Chile is officially the OECD's poorest member with the worst education. But it's there. Chile's got, in education, the best education results in Latin America and the worst in the OECD. So it kind of straddles these two worlds, but it has edged into the OECD world of rich countries.
It's an interesting one because Chile does collect a lot of data about a lot of things. Doesn't necessarily collect them entirely credibly, but they have more experience than other countries in Latin America at collecting an official battery of data. So, yes, by Latin American standards, Chile is...
So the fairly high figures for deaths probably do reflect an underlying honesty more than anything else.
Well, and a higher rate of testing, probably a different relationship with social security and health security.
Okay. So what do you make of the very low figures, for example, in Argentina?
Well, non-credible in my opinion. I'm not a doctor, but
if you were, we'd have him here in a white coat and stethoscope. Anything to like raise the level of credibility of the show.
Yeah, I mean, it's the numbers in Argentina are rather fanciful. The numbers are fanciful everywhere.
Yeah.
Certainly, there are Argentinians obliged to go along with whatever the government comes up with. There are others safe enough to ignore those figures.
Why are they so obliged?
Well, because they don't have access to any better information.
I see what you mean. Not because they lose their jobs, so they question the figures. No, this is not an authoritarian country.
Yes.
It's very unauthoritarian really now, and that's something I think we'll have to talk about in the future.
Yes.
Someone like Britain now feels more authoritarian than Chile, for sure.
Yes. In certain respects, yes.
But anyway, we mustn't get onto that now. So the Argentinian figures are not credible. How do we have any more accurate idea of what they might be, really?
Well, I mean, there's the excess death figures, and some of the Argentinian news outlets will basically apply the methodology for excess death that's being followed by The Economist, among other sources, to the Argentinian case, and they'll come up with much, much higher figures than the official figures that are coming out.
Like how much higher?
Oh, like 10 times more.
Oh, right. Okay.
Order of magnitude. In Chile, the health department itself reports effectively two figures. One which goes through the civil registry, and another that's compiled by the health department's statistical agency.
Got it.
And includes suspected deaths. And that number is about 4,500 higher than the civil registry figure at the moment.
So it's like 50% higher, not 10 times higher.
Yes, it's within touch. It's a grim business, I think, counting particularly deaths. It's certainly good that Chile's made an enormous effort to test many people.
Yeah.
At the same time, at the moment, 2/3 of the way through July, I think that the country's at economic breaking point.
That's right.
And under lockdown in Santiago and in other large population centres, I can't see it lasting much longer.
Now, we should talk a bit about what it actually feels like here, which is, I suppose most of the misery is kind of out of our sight because it takes part geographically in the poor suburbs.
Yeah.
But, in European countries, for example, you have people put on furlough being paid by the government, and that took off pretty quickly. And, these are large sums of money. I remember thinking France started off €1,000 a month if you were self-employed, and I don't know, so reasonably quite significant amounts of money. Here, for quite a while there was nothing at all. Then there was this payment to people who were considered like really poor, which was 50,000 pesos, I think, to start with. What was the first payment?
Was it 100 or 50?
It started off as 50 and then it went up. So after really quite some weeks, 50,000 pesos, and that's about £50 sterling, $60.
Yes.
And so people are going hungry, they are actually starving,
People are very indebted.
And these didn't apply. These only applied to the poor, not to what we call the middle class.
Yes.
The trouble is, the middle class, what's called the middle class here, are what we would call the poor in the rest of the OECD. You know.
Yes. We have two groups: the middle class and the most vulnerable. The most vulnerable are. I don't know if you'd say abject poverty, but
let's say they're people that, when you're parking your car, you know, a chap might appear behind you, like sort of doing that with his finger, okay, and you give him a small coin. You know, that's a lot of the population.
The middle class seems to refer to people who are certainly wealthier than abject poverty.
But it's like the United States, right? Because in Britain, when we say middle class, we think of somebody who's had a pretty good education, who lives quite nicely. In the States, I believe, it means somebody who's really not doing that great.
Well, certainly in parts of continental Europe as well, it means not poor and not wealthy. I think it's used more or less consistently with that in Chile. It's used very broadly, but middle class people do not have to take out 10% of their superannuation savings to survive. Which is a policy that's been copied from other countries, including Australia.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's been floated here that people can take out 10% of their pension pot, okay? And a very interesting figure came out of that, which was that, you know, the average pension pot was calculated, and so what, 10%? 10% of the average pension pot would be 1,300,000 pesos, meaning the average pension pot is 13 million pesos, which is about £13,000, say $15,000. I guess that's everybody, including people at the beginning, middle and end of their working lives. So let's say the average is double that for the people at the end of their working lives.
Yes.
This £26,000, $30,000 has got to yield income for a pension. So you can imagine what the pensions here are like.
It's pretty grim. Today an economist, Claudia Sanhueza, came out and said, well, when the pension funds perform as badly as ours do, maybe it's not such a dangerous policy.
Oh, right, because you might as well get the money now because you're not going to see much of it.
That is not a vote of confidence in her fellow economists
right.
in Chile.
Right, that's right. But other than that, so really considering the penury and suffering, people have been very good, haven't they? I mean, they've been very well behaved, really.
So far, yes. There
have been some protests.
Yes, it's been moving to see people really, as often happens in Chile, people will identify important moments to some extent and show a certain level of discipline and sacrifice around them.
Yeah, and quite a high level of sacrifice.
But we're at the very end of people's...
That's what's manageable.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
And the economy needs to be restarted. There's no sign of leadership, and I don't just mean from the president, I mean from the other parliamentarians, the trade union movement, also basically playing things in their own interests.
Right.
There's
political chaos, the president's own supposed supporters in parliament, you know, voting with the opposition on various topics like this superannuation, this 10% scheme.
As far as we can tell, there's a wide public expectation that they will be going back to work after the national holidays in mid-September.
Mid-September, that's a long way off though.
That's a long way away. The country, I don't think, can last that long.
Yeah. Well, that's right. I mean, it's extraordinary. If you think, you know, they're forecasting for Chile a GDP decline of about 13-14%, I think, this year, which sounds fairly modest, really, considering you look outside and the streets are deserted.
A lost year of school for
right.
kids who don't perform particularly well.
That's
the
right.
Schooling or the...
It's truly disastrous. I mean, Chile's a $300 billion economy, so let's say 15% of that is $45 billion. So you've got to say the same goes for all countries, you know. Surely any conceivable policy would be cheaper than just shutting down the economy, like putting all the old people in luxury hotels. Anything would be cheaper than what's being... But anyway, that's a general point, not just...
Certainly at this point, I mean, I don't think it's anyone's fault that we've arrived to this situation, but it'd be really helpful to have some leadership.
Oh, right, so a message delivered in English to the Chilean authorities. We'll have to redo this one in Spanish, I think. So that's probably it. We could describe the scene, but it's like everywhere else: empty streets, people wearing masks. You know,
A lot of for rent signs.
a lot of for rent signs.
Particularly around shops.
Lots of shops. People already have gone bust. But that's the same as everywhere else. So I guess on that note, we'll just wrap it up. Thank you very much for listening.